Hi everyone, this is Studio Slave and welcome to this video where we're going to be covering the setup changes in Ableton Live 10. So if I go to the audio preferences, in the audio tab we can see our sound card is selected and we can go into the input configuration, and here you can now see that we can type our own input and output labels for all of the inputs and outputs on our sound card. So in this case, for my mono input, I know I've got the Moog Sub 37 connected to my sound card on mono input 1, and on mono input 2 I've got the 80-20-20 condenser microphone. And then I can also set any stereo inputs if I'm using any, but in this case I'm not. So we've got those set up, and then we can go to our outputs, and I've already turned off a few that I'm not using. So in this case I'm only using mono output 3, so this could be going to any outboard hardware, but I'm using mine to go back out to the Moog, and that means I can put anything I want, such as drum buses, through the Moog, and I can add a bit of filtering or maybe even some distortion and then bring that back into Live and record it in. So it's much easier with these labels, so I don't have to mess around trying to figure out which cable's which. And then as for the stereo outputs, I've got my main monitors, and then I've also got some alternative monitors. I've then got 2 virtual outputs as well, so I can route that to other places on my computer. And then finally I've got the Q or the headphone mix as well. So that's everything set up on the preferences end of things. So what we can now do is we can close down this output configuration, close down the preferences, and the reason this is so useful is routing can be quite complicated at the best of times, especially when nothing's labelled, but now as you can see we've got everything nice and neatly labelled in the input and output tabs for absolutely every single one of our channels. So what we can do is we can listen through our main monitors or through our alternative monitors, and there's no need to go messing around with the cables and trying to find out what we're sending where. Likewise, we've also got the headphones here in the Q out, so what we could do is we could create a completely separate mix which we could send to someone in a vocal booth or a guitarist or a session musician, and it just gives us a lot more control for knowing where we're sending things. Or in other cases, it might not even be for a session musician, you might just be sending it to some outboard and you want to know to what piece of outboard you're sending it to. So next we're going to go through some of the changes with recording and the metronome. So whilst we've set up the input labels for the Moog, we might as well actually do some recording with it. So all I'm going to do is make a new audio channel with Command T. Just take this out of the group, and if we go down to the inputs and outputs, to the drop down, we'll go to external in. And then because I've got this plugged into my sound card and I labelled it, we can see there we've got the Moog or we've got the mic. So I'm going to go for the Moog. And then all I have to do is arm this track, and then we're going to hear the Moog coming through the DAW into Ableton Live. So we could actually go one further here and we could route our drums through the Moog's filter. So to do that we go to external out, and because we've already set this up, we can see here we've got the Moog filter input. And then what we could do is play those drums, and then we could filter them and record them back in on this 6 audio, which I've just renamed to Moog. So in this case, we're just going to play a few bass notes, and we're not actually going to be filtering or processing the drums, so I'm going to set that back to how it was. And all I'm going to do is play a few notes of the bass just so we can hear that first, and then we'll turn on the metronome and go through some of the different click sounds. Okay, so we've now got some bass notes recorded onto our Moog track, so I'm going to turn on the metronome, and all I'm going to do is solo this Moog track so we don't have the rest of the project drowning out the metronome clicks. And then you're still going to be able to hear the click, but all I'm going to do is set that back so it's not set to the headphones. I'm going to set this to the main output, just for good practice. So if we go to the drop-down menu of the metronome, you can see we've got our count in from Live 9, and we've now got 3 different sounds. So we've got the classic one, we've got this subtle click, and then we also have the wood block. And what we can also do is we can change the interval of the clicks now, or change the rhythm. I'm just going to put the rest of the drums in place so you can hear the context of the metronome. So now we can go down and we can set this to something like a triplet pattern. So we'll go for a quarter note triplets. We'll set this to something faster, so we'll go for 8th note triplets. And then we've also got this auto button here as well. And then as we change the time signature, we can hear that updating for the rhythm. So that's all well and good, But the most annoying thing about the metronome is when we're hearing it when we don't want to, so we only want to hear it when we're recording. So we'll set something like a quarter note triplet pattern, and what we'll do is we'll go and record something in. So in this case, I think I'll go for something like a bit of percussion, and we're going to use this new feature in the context menu called Enable Only While Recording. So just to show you now, if I press play, you can see that this metronome is now highlighted out in orange, and this means that even though it's turned on, we can't actually hear it. And the reason for that is, although we've got some tracks armed, they're not actually recording. So as soon as we hit record, this is going to change to yellow, and then we're going to be able to hear the metronome. So let's now use this new feature to record something in. So I think we'll go for a rim shot, just play a few notes so you can hear it. I'll just push up that level ever so slightly, just so you can hear it above the rest of the track. And the metronome is now off, but as soon as we hit record, then we're going to hear that quarter note triplet pattern that we set. So now it's going to be nice and easy for me to emulate this pattern. So now that we've got that recorded in, I'll just set this back to auto mode on the metronome, and then I can unsolo and play my newly recorded triplet pattern in context. And you can hear there we've got that triplet pattern recorded, which I probably wouldn't have been able to do that well had I just used the normal metronome. The final change with the Live 10 setup is now the computer MIDI keyboard is off by default, whereas it was turned on. So a lot of people are pressing buttons or keys on the keyboard, and they're actually just triggering sounds instead of shortcuts. So I imagine Ableton's doing this to get people to use the computer shortcuts a little bit more, as most people have their own MIDI keyboard anyway. So just to show you this, you can see that the keyboard works, and if I press the M shortcut, then we get the computer MIDI keyboard back, and I can just press M again, and then it gets rid of it, and that frees up shortcuts. So if we go into arrangement view, you can see we've got the A button to show automation, and the S button to collapse everything down, which we'll cover later on in the arrangement videos. Thanks very much for watching this video, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.